This is a Trek 1 Series road bike. I got this one to give to my wife for Christmas. I got it on eBay and I got a really good deal on it. $73, and that included tax. I had to drive down to Pueblo to pick it up, but I took my road bike with me. I made a day of it. I went down and I did a really neat ride around the airport. This bike has been stored outside and it's been neglected, so it's gonna need quite a bit of work before we give it to her. Today is the 22nd of December, so we've got 2 days really to get this restored and ready to give her. I also want to have a video on it out before Christmas, so in addition to that, I've got to film it and edit a video. We're gonna be a little bit rushed, but I think it is doable. So in today's video, I'm gonna walk you through taking a bike like this, one that's been neglected, and turning it into a bike that you might actually want to give your wife for Christmas. So if you're interested in that, let's get started. Now that it's clean, now that we can see what we got, I want to take a look at it. I want to see what condition it's in and see what we need to do to it. Starting at the front of the bike, these shifters, they're 8-speed double. I think these are probably Sora. They've got the windows and the indicators. The windows are in really bad shape and they're badly yellowed. There's a lot of scratching on these levers, so I think I'll sand these and give them a coat of paint so they don't look so bad. The drivetrain is actually in pretty nice shape. It looked really bad before it was washed, but now that it's clean, it doesn't look horrible. The Freehub doesn't make any noise. So I am suspicious that it's gummed up. So I plan to remove the rear wheel, take it apart, and I think I'm going to re-grease the bearings, clean up the Freehub, and check those bearings as well. The brake pads, these are one piece. They're rock hard, and they've been poorly adjusted, so they've worn in sort of an odd shape. The tires that are on this bike, I think they're original to the bike. They don't look that bad, but they're really hard. So I can see weather cracking if I look really closely. So I'm going to replace these. I think the frame has enough clearance for 28s, and I have a pair of 28s on the shelf behind me. So I plan to pull these off and replace them with 28s. The frame has a lot of scratches like this in the paint. So one thing I would like to do is touch those up and polish the paint. After looking this bike over, it's actually in better shape than I initially thought. So my plan is to pull the shifters and recondition those, replace the cables, the chain, and the bar tape, do some paint touch-up, and then repack the bearings in the front and rear wheel. I think once I'm done with those, the bike will actually look pretty good. So I think I'm going to start by taking it apart, and I'm going to pull off the components that I want to recondition. got the frame stripped down. I want to polish the paint now, make it look really nice. But first, this yellowed, ugly chainstay protector's got to come off. I'm going to spray this down with a little glass cleaner. Just make sure there's nothing on this paint before I polish it. Here's a look at the two shifters side by side. The one on the left I've reconditioned. So I removed the nameplate and I polished it, tried to remove some of the yellowing. I got it pretty good. While it was off, I painted the needle. I repainted the lever because it was badly scratched up, and I repainted the body. I think that looks pretty good. The rear derailleur's in pretty good shape, but it does need some work. There's some rash here and here. I think it was probably just dropped. If I look at the back side, there's rust coming through on the jockey pulleys. So I suspect that the bearings are going to be in pretty bad shape. My suspicions were correct. Look at this lower pulley. That is all rust. The bearing was just completely packed in there with rust. So I'll clean these up. I'll probably polish this bearing. And then when I put it back in, I'll put a little bit of grease in here. The front derailleur is in really nice shape. Not a lot of rust on it. It's really clean. So it's just going to go right in the ultrasonic and then back on the bike. The chain, however, is not in good shape. It's covered in rust. This is after I cleaned it up. So it's covered in rust. It's really heavily worn. I'm just going to replace it. I am going to keep the quick link though. You never know when you might need one of these. So I'm just going to throw it in the parts bin. These are the brake calipers. They're actually in pretty good shape. They've got some rust on their hardware, and that's because they've sat outside. It looks like somebody replaced the pads on the rear because it's got cartridge pads, and they're in pretty good shape. The fronts are the original one piece, and they're not in good shape. These pads, they were poorly adjusted, and they're just really worn down. I was going to take the time to put these in the ultrasonic, clean them up, polish them, and make them look good. But it turns out I had another set of calipers in my parts bin. These came off my Langster. They don't have the pads, but I've got some new cartridges I can put in here. But these are in much nicer shape. I will clean them up, but they're not rusty on the hardware. And they're quite a bit lighter than what I pulled off that bike. So instead of wasting my time restoring these, I'm just going to use these. The bottom bracket, it didn't feel quite right. Felt a little bit dry and a little bit notchy. I don't have time to get another one, so I took this one apart. I pressed the top cap off so I could get to the bearings, and I removed the seals with a pick. Once I had those out, I cleaned it up in a solvent. Then I put it in the ultrasonic and I cleaned it again. I finished by re-greasing it with a high quality grease and putting the seals back in. Now that it's done, I've got a bottom bracket here that spins and feels new and ready to go back on the bike. I didn't have the tools to disassemble the Freehub, so instead I removed the axle and then I soaked it in WD-40. After a few minutes of soaking and then some twisting of the Freehub, it loosened up and it started ratcheting again. The grease in both hubs had dried out, so I took them apart, I cleaned everything up, and I repacked them with grease. After I put the rear wheel back on the bike and gave it a spin, I realized it was quite a bit out of true. So I used a spoke wrench and retensioned a couple spokes. I didn't get it perfect, but I got it good enough for now. Before I put the drivetrain on, I want to check alignment of the rear derailleur hanger. A lot of used bikes I work on, the derailleur hangers are slightly bent. This one was bent a little bit, but I was able to tweak it using an alignment tool.